Hi everyone, my name is Kurt and welcome to my channel. I've been flying privately for close to 20 years and for most of that, it's been in other people's aircraft. All that changed recently when after some pretty careful consideration, I took the plunge and bought my first airplane, a Lancair Legacy. As I said, this wasn't without some careful consideration. This particular model was like nothing I'd flown before. It goes higher, faster, and requires more skill to fly than any of the other small GA aircraft I'd previously rented. It's an exciting aircraft and it comes with a sticker price to match, so I wanted to be absolutely sure that this was the aircraft for me before pulling the trigger. It also happens to be experimental, something that I've not had any experience with prior, so I knew that overall ownership would be a huge learning experience. It took me a long time to get to this point, so I wanted to share some of my story in the hopes that it might help others work through their own decision regarding ownership. Maybe inspire, maybe motivate, or maybe just give me one more outlet to talk about flying, something that I love to do. And so that's the topic of this video. I've just passed 100 hours in my very own bird, and this documents some of that experience. If this sounds interesting to you, then please continue on and I hope you enjoy. If not, then I'll see you down the road in another video. Either way, let me know in the comments section below. There are lots of advantages to renting, and I'm not here to disparage it. I did it for a long time because it's a convenient, affordable, and flexible way to fly. Over the years, I could move into different types of aircraft on really nothing more than a whim. Step up to fly aircraft with more advanced avionics, faster aircraft, retractable gear, and so on, all without the steep investments that owning requires. This option to mix it up a little bit as I grew in interest, abilities, and while I figured out what I really wanted from aviation was hugely important and kept me interested in flying, until recently anyway. But along with all of the advantages of renting, there were plenty of disadvantages, and it was these that I was tired of, and the effects that they were starting to have on my flying. First and foremost, when you rent, someone other than you is making decisions that will affect how often and how much you fly. I can't count the number of times when the weather was great, I wanted to fly, and the aircraft wasn't available. And in lots of instances, depending on who I was renting from, the aircraft was generally not available for longer or overnight trips, especially during summers when everyone wants to fly. Long cross-country flights, air tours, vacations, and generally all the things that I wanted to do. Renting meant that ultimately I didn't get to fly as much as if I had owned. My flights were short day trips. I really didn't travel in a way that I thought I would. I wasn't exploring. I wasn't pushing my boundaries. I wasn't embarking on different kinds of aviation adventures. All in all, it was feeling repetitive. I was really just building hours, not capabilities, confidence, or new experiences. In effect, I wasn't growing as a pilot, and I was bored. And this wasn't what I wanted from flying. I got to a point where I found that while I still liked to fly, I didn't love it anymore, at least not the way that I used to, and this was sobering. So one day, I made a decision. Go big or go home. And so, with decision made, there's still one very important question left to answer. What do you want to do with your airplane? What's your mission? If you're still with me, you probably already know that aircraft come in all shapes and sizes and capabilities, and the choice of one over another might support or eliminate a particular mission. For example, if you're looking to buy a fast cross-country cruiser, you probably won't find yourself landing on any riverbeds in Alaska. If you live near water, an ocean, a lake, or do a lot of flying around water, you might want to consider an amphibious plane or something with floats. If you have something with floats, you won't be setting any distance records, or speed records, or economy records. And so it goes. And this particular thought exercise extends beyond make and model and into how your aircraft needs to be equipped. For example, if you want to fly IFR or use your plane to get your instrument rating, you'll need a more capable panel than you would if you were just flying short distances or VFR only, likely something with an autopilot. And so like with most things, ownership requires that you think through these trade-offs carefully, because we're talking a rather large investment in both time and money. You'll need to be comfortable with these trade-offs. So for me, when looking at this, it was easier for me to start with what I knew I didn't want to do anymore. So first of all, no more flying locally for a $100 hamburger or $200 breakfast. Been there, done that. If I was going to get a $100 hamburger, it was going to be in another province, another country, state, or at an airport that I'd never conceived of visiting before. I also didn't want to get up flying just to punch holes in the sky, or for the sole purpose of staying current or getting the minimum time required by my insurance company. I wanted to cover larger distances. I wanted my flying to trigger adventures and to take me to places I'd never been before, across Canada, the States, and beyond. I wanted to be challenged. I wanted to learn more about flying in the process and become a better pilot. More than anything, I wanted to fall in love with flying all over again. Now this is where I started having some fun in my thinking. So what did I really want, and what kind of plane could achieve it? Well, for me, speed, travel, and exploration have always been my interest, both in the air and on the ground, so I figured that'd be a good place to start. I started looking for a cross-country aircraft that liked to cover ground quickly. Second, and perhaps more than anything, I wanted to be challenged. I wanted an aircraft that would push my boundaries as a pilot, commit me to continual learning and a growth mindset. I wanted a plane that I wouldn't outgrow anytime soon, a plane that I could use for years to come, help me become a better pilot, and maybe a plane that would put a smile back on my face. So, I set my sights on finding a plane that let me achieve this exact mission. I soon found a few aircraft that fit the basic bill, and they seemed the perfect logical progression for me. I quickly narrowed down the field to two candidates, the Glasair 3 and the Lancair Legacy. Both are outstanding aircraft with performance that'll bring tears to your eyes. I did a ton of reading on these beasts and pored over the specs. I test flew, and the rest is history. And about a year after watching classified ads and expanding my network, and one failed purchase attempt, I found my ship and began the process of importing her into Canada. Well, I'm now 100 hours into ownership, and what have I learned? I've learned, first of all, that owning a plane is a non-stop learning experience. I mentioned that I had one failed purchase attempt, and this happened because of something we found in the maintenance records of that aircraft before I pulled the trigger on that purchase, and I'm glad I found it. Pre-buys and maintenance are super important considerations. What you find in a pre-buy will likely depend on the age of the aircraft and its maintenance history, but no matter what, get a good one. Have it done by someone you trust or who comes highly recommended. Mistakes made during this phase will have a lasting impact on your ownership experience. I found it can be very helpful to have two shops involved, one for the pre-buy and one for a second opinion on the maintenance records. In fact, by doing this, I discovered a discrepancy in the maintenance records of the plane that I was originally interested in buying. It was a subtle discrepancy, but one that had large implications, and it took two sets of eyes to find. When it comes to a pre-buy, measure twice, cut once. Luckily, I got my deposit back. Ongoing maintenance is also a critical part of ownership, and my only advice here is don't leave it until after you've made your purchase to find a shop. Start this search early, as it's likely that you'll find some small squawks or other issues that need to be cleared up once your bird is in your hangar. Find a shop that's willing to help you out. It may be at your home field, but it need not be. It's just more convenient if it is. You just have to find somebody you trust or who comes recommended from other pilots. And how do you do that? Talk to people. Talk to other pilots at the field. Find out who they recommend. Find out who they don't recommend. If I can leave you with one thought on maintenance and pre-buys, is that good mechanics that you can work with, are worth their weight in gold. Speak to the mechanics. Let them know what you're thinking. Which model? See if they have experience on that model. If they do, see if they've done pre-buys and are interested in helping you out. The one thing that owners always have in the back of their minds is the possibility of large and unexpected costs. I'm very happy to say that in terms of this, there have been no large surprises for me so far. 100 hours is still not much time, so there's plenty of opportunity for things to creep up. But I did try to minimize the chance of this by doing my research beforehand, knowing both the aircraft construction and the maintenance history. In terms of overall costs, annuals were right on what I expected. There were a few small things that came up over the last 100 hours. I have gas-charged struts that hold the canopy open. They needed to be replaced. As part of the import process, I found I needed the ELT replaced. One day on one of my flights, the fuel pump started giving me erratic pressure readings. I took it to the shop and we determined that it should be replaced. And there's been a few little snags here and there, but all of them I'm very, very happy that I had a mechanic that I could work closely with to iron out. One small surprise that I had regarding cost was the amount that I was spending on subscriptions. And it's not that it was a ridiculous amount, but it was more than I would have originally thought. Depending on the type of avionics you have in your plane, you could spend $1,000, $1,200, $1,500 a year just to keep your updated charts and databases. I pay $40 a month for SiriusXM. That gives me weather in the cockpit, and I wouldn't fly without it, so it's worth every penny. I pay about $300 a year for Garmin Pilot. For-flight costs are approximately the same. I also use a Garmin InReach tracker for my longer cross-country or backcountry flights. That has a subscription as well attached to it. If you want Jeppesen or other flight charts, perhaps you have a backup EFIS, there's going to be more piled on top of that. All in all, not insurmountable, but at the same time, it adds up, and it was a little bit surprising to me. And finally, and maybe more importantly, I don't think about the costs the same way that I used to when I was renting. It used to be after, flying 2 to 3 hours, I would start to get a little bit antsy because I had a counter running in my mind that was still racking up time, and I was busy converting those into costs as I flew. For me, ownership takes that right off the table. Rational? Maybe not. but it's definitely a change in the way that I think about costs. And now that all is said and done, was it worth it? I'm 100 hours in, and is ownership meeting the goals that I had set? Would I do it again? First of all, was it worth it? If I were to look at ownership from a pure cost perspective, then absolutely not. Even though it's not a money pit, it's not cheap. I could have rented or bought block time for a long time to come with what I've already invested in maintenance and other costs. But as I already said, the cheapest possible flight was not a motivating factor in my decision to buy. My plane has changed the way that I fly, when I fly, and the reason I fly. It's quick and it's efficient, and I like the precision it encourages me to fly with, and I haven't stopped learning or grinning. In my first few hours of type conversion training, I had done things that I hadn't ever done in all my previous flying, either with other pilots or by myself. I flew higher than ever before. I flew faster than ever before. I flew over mountains for the first time, and I covered more distance on some of my training flights than on my longest legs in my prior years of flying. It's also reminded me of how much I still love flying. I don't think there could have been anything else that would have rekindled my love for flying the way that ownership has. Since buying, I can hardly wait to go flying again. I know that I can do it whenever the mood strikes and the weather cooperates. I'm now deep into my IFR training and loving every minute of it. So yes, ownership has met my goals. In fact, owning my own plane has inspired me to think bigger about what I want to do with it, and I've been reminded about how much adventure there is waiting for us pilots. I've added 2 new items to my bucket list, both things that I hope to achieve in the not too distant future. First of all, flying her to Greenland. The second, qualifying at the Reno Air Races. Both are audacious, both are terrifying, but they both remind me of why I wanted to fly in the first place. Now to the most important question. If I had a chance to do it all over again, would I? In a heartbeat. Thanks for watching.